The vastness of the Steel Canyon Ranch was not merely a matter of acreage, though it possessed that in staggering abundance, a kingdom of rolling hills, jagged arroyos, and endless grasslands that bled into the hazy, purple horizon. Its true scale was measured in the sheer, imposing will of its master, Ethan Cole, a man whose presence seemed to cast a long, cool shadow over every blade of grass, every head of cattle, and every soul who drew a wage from his treasury. The ranch house itself, a long, low-slung structure of bleached timber and dark local stone, stood as a monument to this will. It was not built for comfort or hospitality, but for endurance, its lines severe and unforgiving, its wide verandas looking out over the domain not with welcome, but with silent surveillance. Inside, the air was still and carried the faint, clean scent of lemon oil and leather, a smell that spoke of meticulous order and an absence of frivolity. The main room was dominated by a massive riverstone fireplace, cold and swept clean now in the late spring warmth, above which hung a pair of formidable longhorn skulls, their horns spanning an impossible width. They were not trophies of a hunt, but relics of a conquest, the founders of the herd that had built this empire. The furniture was heavy, dark, and spare, chosen for durability over aesthetics, and the few decorations were functional. A meticulously coiled lariat on a wall peg, a pair of silver-inlaid spurs displayed under glass, a topographical map of the ranch lands framed in oak. Ethan moved through these rooms with a proprietorial air that was so complete it was almost unconscious. He was a man in his prime, perhaps nearing 40, but his eyes, the color of glacial ice under a pale Stetson, held a weariness that belonged to a much older man. His face was tanned and lined from a lifetime spent squinting into the sun and wind, the features sharp and uncompromising, a face carved from the same hard rock that underpinned his land. His hands, even when clean, bore the permanent calluses and scars of hard work, though they now spent more time holding ledgers and deeds than reins and branding irons. His wealth was evident not in gaudy display. He wore no silver rings, his belt buckle was simple brass, but in the flawless quality of his boots, the fine weave of his shirt, the confident, unhurried economy of his movements. He was a man who owned the very ground he walked on, and that knowledge was in every step he took. His reputation was as much a feature of the landscape as the mesquite flats or the canyon that gave the ranch its name. They called him the Iron Rancher, a title spoken with a mixture of respect, fear, and, in the hushed tones of the bunkhouse, a degree of pity. His shrewdness in business was legendary. He could out-negotiate any cattle buyer from Abilene to Santa Fe, and his herd, a breed of hardy Herefords crossed with resilient Longhorn stock, was the envy of the territory. His word, once given, was binding, but it was rarely given lightly. He expected a day's work for a day's pay, and he received it, for his wages were generous and his discipline absolute. A man caught lazing or drunk on duty would be paid off and sent walking before the sun set. There was no second chance, no appeal to sentiment. Ethan Cole dealt in facts, figures, and results. This philosophy extended most famously and perplexingly to the outside world, to the matter of matrimony. For years, the eligible women of the territory, and then from increasingly distant cities, had been presented to him like fine thoroughbreds at an auction. They arrived in carriages and on trains, accompanied by ambitious fathers and hopeful mothers, each a paragon of some perceived virtue. There was the daughter of the railroad baron from St. Louis, her laughter as sharp and calculated as a stock transaction, her eyes already appraising the value of the silver and the dimensions of the house for refurbishment. There was the belle from New Orleans, all false modesty and fluttery lashes, who spoke endlessly of parties and Paris fashions and recoiled from the dust on her kid leather shoes as if it were poison. There was the sturdy, capable daughter of a neighboring rancher, pretty enough and skilled in the running of a household, but whose conversation never ventured beyond the price of feed and the patterns of migrating birds. He refused them all, politely at first, with a formal thanks for their journey and a closed expression that discouraged argument. Later, as the parade continued and his annoyance grew, his rejections became colder, more abrupt. He found flaws with the unerring accuracy of a sharpshooter finding a bullseye. One was too vain, her mind a hollow echo chamber of gossip and self-regard. Another was too greedy, her interest in him vanishing the moment a less wealthy, but more charming, Cowboy tipped his hat to her. A third was simply too foolish, her understanding of the world so limited he felt a profound weariness at the thought of having to explain anything to her, from the principles of breeding to the simple beauty of a desert sunset. He saw their arrival not as an opportunity, but as an intrusion, a disruption to the precise, orderly machinery of his life. His wealth, he concluded, was a magnet that attracted only those who wished to possess it, not him. His personhood was an inconvenient appendage to the real prize, the deed to the Steel Canyon. The rejections became a ritual. A new proposal would arrive by post on heavy, perfumed stationery. His foreman, a grizzled man named Harlan, who had known Ethan since he was a boy, would hand it to him with a silent, knowing look. Ethan would take it to his study, a room that was the starkest reflection of his inner world. It contained a massive oak desk, bare save for a blotter, a silver inkwell, and a wire basket for correspondence. One wall was lined with ledgers, each spine perfectly aligned, each containing the financial history of the ranch in his tight, precise script. Another held guns, a Winchester rifle, a pair of Colt revolvers, each cleaned, oiled, and ready for use. There were no pictures of family, no sentimental mementos. He would slit the envelope with a bone-handled letter opener, read the contents with a face of stone, and then, without a flicker of emotion, place it in the bottom right drawer of his desk. The drawer was already half full with such letters, a growing monument to his own isolation. He would then close the drawer, the soft click a period at the end of the sentence. The matter was closed. His life continued its solitary, purposeful course. His days began before dawn, with a cup of black coffee taken on the veranda as he watched the light bleed back into the world. He would then ride out with Harlan, inspecting fences, checking water levels in the creek, observing the condition of the herds. His eyes missed nothing, a lame calf, a patch of invasive weed, a stretch of fence line needing repair. He would point, Harlan would nod, and the thing would be done. He returned for a solitary lunch, often taken at his desk while reviewing accounts. The afternoons might involve meetings with buyers or overseeing the work in the blacksmith shop. The evenings were spent in his study, the ledger open before him. The only sound the scratch of his pen and the occasional pop of a log in the fireplace. The housekeeper, a widow named Mrs. Gable, kept the house running with ghost-like efficiency, but she was not a presence, merely a function. The emptiness of the house was a physical thing, a coldness that not even the largest fire could fully dispel. He had built a perfect, self-sustaining system, a fortress of prosperity and order. And within its walls, in the deep quiet of the night when the work was done and the ledgers were closed, the silence echoed with a hollow resonance that felt, though he would never admit it, an awful lot like loneliness. But to Ethan Cole, loneliness was a far lesser evil than the corrosive presence of the wrong person. It was a price he had long ago decided he was willing to pay. The gate to his world was closed, the drawbridge drawn up, and he was the solitary, unwavering sentinel guarding it against all comers. The late afternoon sun hung heavy and molten over the vast expanse of the Steel Canyon, casting long, distorted shadows that stretched like dark fingers across the dusty yard. The day's heat was beginning to relinquish its fierce grip, but the air still shimmered above the hard-packed earth. The rhythmic, monotonous sounds of the ranch continued unabated. The distant lowing of cattle, the metallic clang from the blacksmith's shed, the murmur of the hands returning from the pastures. It was into this familiar scene that an anomaly quietly inserted itself. She appeared not on the main road in a cloud of dust and the rattle of a carriage, but from the direction of the footpath that led from the distant town, a solitary figure materializing against the shimmering horizon. Her approach was so silent and devoid of presumption that for a long while, no one noticed her at all. She simply stopped at the formidable iron gate that marked the official boundary of Ethan Cole's domain, her hands clasped loosely in front of her, and waited. Her name was Alice, and her presence was a stark contrast to everything the ranch and its owner represented. She was not a creature of dust and thunder, but of quiet resolve. Her dress was a faded, practical gray, worn thin in places but scrupulously clean, and it hung on a frame that was slender but not fragile. A simple, worn shawl was draped over her shoulders, and on her head was a sunbonnet that shadowed her features, though it could not obscure the calm, unwavering stillness of her posture. She did not call out, did not rattle the gate, did not attempt to draw attention. She merely stood, a patient, silent sentinel at the edge of the empire, her eyes, a shade of deep, sober hazel, taking in the scale of the ranch, the imposing house, the sheer potency of the man's world she sought to enter. Her presence was eventually noted by a young cowboy mending a saddle near the corral. He nudged his companion, and soon a ripple of curiosity spread through the hands. They were accustomed to visitors of a certain type, important men in fine suits or beautifully dressed women who arrived with an air of entitlement. This was something entirely different. There was a palpable dignity in her stillness that commanded a strange respect, quelling any potential for mockery. The foreman, Harlan, wiping his hands on an oily rag, walked slowly towards the gate, his experienced eyes missing no detail. He saw the dust on her worn shoes, the weary set of her shoulders that spoke of a long journey on foot, but also the straightness of her spine and the quiet intensity in her gaze that was neither fearful nor begging. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked, his voice gruff but not unkind. She inclined her head slightly. Her voice, when it came, was low and clear, carrying easily in the still air without being loud. "I am here to see Mr. Cole. My name is Alice Mason." There was no elaboration, no attempt to justify her presence. The silence between them stretched, thick and heavy, broken only by the distant sounds of the ranch. Ethan Cole, momentarily disarmed by the woman's unnerving composure, found his prepared speech of dismissal dying on his lips. His instinct was to end the interaction immediately, to retreat into the familiar, ordered silence of his house. Yet something held him there, a spark of curiosity, the sheer novelty of a situation he could not instantly categorize and control. His voice, when he finally spoke, was colder than the evening air, laced with skepticism. "State your business." The woman, Alice, did not drop her gaze. Her hands remained still at her sides. "I understand you have a library, Mr. Cole. A large one, left by your grandfather. I was told it has fallen into disuse and disarray." Her words were not a question, but a statement of fact, delivered with a quiet assurance that suggested she had done her research. Ethan was taken aback. Of all the things he had expected, pleas for money, proposals of marriage, offers of partnership, this was the furthest from his mind. The library. He had almost forgotten it existed. It was a dark, dusty room on the second floor, a monument to a different kind of ambition his grandfather had possessed. To him, it was a useless relic, a repository of forgotten stories and outdated knowledge that held no value next to the tangible realities of cattle and land. He regarded her with narrowed eyes, trying to decipher the angle of her approach. "And what is your interest in it?" "I am a reader and an organizer," she replied, her tone even and practical. "I seek employment, not a handout. I propose to restore your library, to catalog the books, repair those that are damaged, and create order from the chaos. I believe it is a collection of value, and it deserves to be treated as such." She did not smile, did not attempt to flatter him. She simply presented her case as a business proposition. Employment. The word echoed strangely in the space between them. He was prepared to refuse a bride, but how did one refuse a job applicant without sounding irrational? His mind raced. This was an intrusion, however cleverly disguised. Letting a stranger into his home, into a room that was, despite its neglect, a part of his private world. Yet, a perverse part of him was intrigued. He could call her bluff. See how long this quiet act would last when faced with real, tedious work. He said, the word sharp and final. "A trial period. 1 month. You will be paid a basic wage for your labor, nothing more. Your work will be assessed by myself. You will have no claim beyond that. You will speak to no one unnecessarily, and you will not interfere with the running of this ranch. My foreman, Harlan, will keep an account of your time. Do you accept these terms?" He expected hesitation, negotiation, perhaps a flicker of the true motive he he was sure lay beneath the surface. There was none. She simply nodded, a single, decisive motion. "I accept. Thank you, Mr. Cole." And with that, the gates to his fortress were opened, not for a queen, but for a quiet, determined librarian. He instructed Harlan to show her to the room and provide the necessary materials. His orders given with a stern warning to observe her closely. As he watched her follow Harlan toward the house, her figure small and straight against the grandeur of his property, Ethan felt a peculiar sensation, the unsettling yet undeniable feeling that he had just set in motion a chain of events whose outcome he could not possibly predict. The library on the second floor was exactly as Alice had imagined, yet far more profound in its state of beautiful decay. It was a large, high-ceilinged room that smelled overwhelmingly of time, a rich, complex aroma of old paper, cracked leather, and undisturbed dust. Sunlight struggled through the grime-caked windows, illuminating swirling motes in the air like lazy constellations. Books were everywhere. They filled the floor-to-ceiling shelves that lined the walls. They were stacked in precarious towers on the floor. They spilled out of overturned boxes. Many were leather-bound, their spines elegantly tooled with gold leaf that had dulled but not entirely vanished. Others were simpler, their cloth covers faded by sun and time. Some showed the cruel marks of neglect, spines broken, pages foxed with brown spots, covers warped by moisture. It was a cemetery of ideas, a kingdom of silence. For Alice, it was not a daunting task, it was a calling. She began the very next morning, arriving at first light. She had refused Harlan's offer of a helper, preferring to work alone. Her first act was not to touch a single book, but to wrench open the heavy windows, letting the fresh, dry prairie air flood in, stirring the dust of decades. She brought in buckets of water and clean rags, and began the methodical, meditative process of cleaning. She washed the windows until they shone, revealing the stunning view of the canyon. She wiped down every inch of every empty shelf until the darkwood gleamed. Only then did she turn to the books themselves. She worked with a reverent, meticulous patience that was a world away from the frantic, productive energy of the ranch below. She would take a single volume, gently brush the dust from its top edge and spine, examine it for damage, and then carefully wipe its cover. She treated each book as an individual, assessing its needs. Some needed only a gentle cleaning. Others, with loose pages, were set aside for careful repair with paste and linen tape. She discovered wonders. A first edition volume of poetry from Boston, a historical folio of the region with hand-drawn maps, a complete set of Shakespeare's plays, their pages thin as onion skin. She began to sort them not just by size or color, but by subject and author, creating a mental map of the collection's vast intellectual territory. Ethan, true to his word, observed her. Initially, his inspections were brief and suspicious. He would appear in the doorway unannounced, his frame filling the space, his cold eyes scanning the room for signs of pretense or laziness. He expected to find her gazing out the window or pretending to work. Instead, he always found her utterly absorbed, her hands moving with gentle precision, a look of deep concentration on her face. The room was transforming around her. Order was emerging from chaos. The air was clearing. The light was brighter. He began to linger longer, under the pretext of checking on the progress of his investment. He would pick up a book she had cleaned and restored, feeling the solid weight of it in his hands, noticing the care with which a torn page had been mended. He found himself asking questions. The crisis arrived not with a whisper, but with a roar. It was deep in the heart of the night, a time when the ranch was usually submerged in a profound silence, broken only by the wind and the restless stirring of the animals. The first sign was a frantic barking from the dogs, followed seconds later by a shout of pure alarm that tore through the darkness. Then came the ominous, flickering orange glow painting the window panes of the main house. Ethan was awake and pulling on his boots in an instant, his heart hammering not with fear, but with a fierce, focused adrenaline. He burst out onto the veranda to a scene of chaos. The night air was thick with smoke and the panic screams of horses. One of the main hay barns, packed high with winter feed, was fully ablaze. the fire roaring hungrily into the black sky, sending great swirling embers soaring on the thermal winds. These deadly sparks threatened to carry the disaster to the nearby bunkhouse, the stables, and even the main house itself. The entire world had been reduced to a terrifying dance of light, shadow, and heat. Men, roused from their sleep, were running in every direction, some half-dressed, their faces masks of confusion and panic. A bucket line had formed, but it was disorganized and hopelessly inadequate against the inferno. The horses in the adjacent corral were wild with terror, crashing against the fences. It was a scenario that threatened everything Ethan had built, not just property, but lives. He roared orders, his voice cutting through the bedlam, trying to impose order on the chaos, directing men to wet down the roofs of the threatened buildings. His entire being was focused on the macro battle, the strategic containment of the disaster. It was Harlan who grabbed his arm, pointing wordlessly towards the stables. And there, in the midst of the swirling smoke and terrifying shadows, Ethan saw her, Alice. She was not standing frozen or screaming. She had taken charge of a secondary effort with a calm authority that was breathtaking. She had organized a group of younger cowboys who seemed too stunned to think for themselves, directing them to form a second bucket line from the horse trough to the bunkhouse roof, which was already starting to smolder from falling embers. Her voice, though not a shout, carried clearly and firmly, a point of sanity in the madness. Then, as Ethan watched, a terrifying cry came from the stable hand. A prized new mare and her foal were still trapped in an end stall, too terrified to be let out. Without a moment's hesitation, without even looking to see if anyone was following, Alice did something unthinkable. She soaked her shawl in a water trough, wrapped it around her mouth and nose, and plunged into the smoke-filled stable. The dawn that broke over the Steel Canyon was a somber, smoke-tinged affair. The air still carried the acrid smell of wet charcoal and burned hay. The great barn was a blackened, smoldering ruin, a grim scar on the landscape. The cost was high, precious winter feed lost, a structure to be rebuilt, a pervasive sense of exhaustion and shock hanging over the men who gathered in quiet groups, drinking coffee and assessing the damage. Yet, the mood was not one of defeat. Thanks to the frantic, coordinated efforts, the fire had been contained. The bunkhouse, the stables, and the main house stood intact. No lives, human or animal, had been lost. It was a victory snatched from the jaws of potential total disaster. In the cold light of the new day, the events of the night took on a mythic quality. And at the center of the stories already being quietly told was the figure of Alice Mason. The men who had taken orders from her spoke of her calmness with a new, profound respect. The hand who had taken the mare from her looked at her with something akin to awe. Ethan had spent the early hours with Harlan, doing the grim calculus of loss. But his mind was not on numbers. It was filled with a single indelible image: Alice walking out of the smoke, saving what he valued. The hollow silence of his house, which he had once valued above all else, now felt like an emptiness waiting to be filled. He found her not in the library, but in the kitchen garden behind the house. Mrs. Gable had insisted she sit down and had given her a cup of tea. She was sitting on a simple wooden bench, her face pale and clean to soot, but her hands, wrapped around the warm cup, were still trembling slightly from the adrenaline and exhaustion. She was looking east towards the rising sun, her profile calm but weary. She did not hear him approach. He stopped a few feet away, and for a moment he simply watched her. He saw not the quiet woman who had appeared at his gate, nor the efficient librarian, nor even the brave heroine of the fire. He saw the whole of her, the resilience, the intelligence, the profound strength, and the quiet vulnerability she allowed no one else to see. All the walls he had built, all the cold logic he had used to keep the world at bay, seemed foolish and fragile now. He walked forward and sat down beside her on the bench. The simple action made her turn to look at him. Her eyes were tired, but they still held that deep, unassailable calm. He did not speak. Words, for so long his tools of business and dismissal, failed him. Instead, he reached out, his movements slow and deliberate, and covered one of her trembling hands with his own. It was not a gesture of possession or demand. It was an offer, an acknowledgement, a connection. His hand, always so sure and steady, was now the one seeking anchorage. She looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his face. In his eyes, she no longer saw the cold, iron rancher. She saw a man, weary from his own isolation, who had finally found something real to hold on to. They sat in silence as the sun climbed higher, burning away the last of the night's smoke haze, illuminating the land not as a possession, but as a shared future. The silence between them was no longer hollow. It was deep understanding, and filled with a promise that needed no words. The gate around his heart was finally and irrevocably open.